The basis of terrain solutions is on geoscience. Most of the contaminants that we're assessing or looking for are on this stage called the earth. The soils, the groundwater, the things underneath our feet. We're in a unique position to anticipate where these things will travel and what impacts they will have on the urban environment around them. Although Terrain Solutions operates in the state of Texas, we have a challenge in that the geographic sections of Texas all have very different geology. Here in the Gulf Coast area, we have a sand, silt, clay delta that's underneath our feet. So it's easy for us to predict. If we're up in the Llano area in the north, we have hard rocks, we have limestone, a little harder to predict where the chemicals go. We're very familiar with how to get information and the regulations in our area. If you have a project in the state, it's best to have someone with real local boots on the ground knowledge. I know a lot of consultants are hired from New York, and number one, they shouldn't be coming to Texas because of licensure issues. They're learning the geology rather on the spot instead of having a working knowledge. That may end up in more expensive assessments in the long run and probably mistakes. In the course of our business, we're asked very often by our clients, is our property contaminated or not? We answer that question by collecting samples.
Soil samples, groundwater samples, basically seeing what's under the surface.
Very often, we come back to them and say, yes, you do have an issue. And sometimes we get from them, well, it's impossible. We bought this property and we didn't do this. This has to be somebody else that caused the problem. And therefore, they'll contact their attorney, or sometimes they call their insurance company, consults us, and we are engaged as subject matter experts. Then our job is basically trying to differentiate the timing of when this chemical was placed in the soil or groundwater, and whether it constitutes damage.
If there's no contamination, everything's fine. But if there is, we will either look to start remediation or see what we can do in order to reduce that pollution, which is exactly what I wanted to do.
Just the presence of contaminant in the subsurface doesn't mean that it's damage in the eyes of the regulatory agency. There are some forensic studies that as geoscientists we can do. So we start doing some analysis to find out, is this origination? When did it occur? Sometimes also these what we call contaminants are actually natural substances found in the soils. For example, lead. Lead can be found naturally in our soil. Arsenic can be found naturally in our soil. We have to differentiate using geochemistry the difference between what this lead or arsenic looks like, what it's combined with. If it's combined with something that's a clay, then we know, well, it's probably a natural. If it's combined with something that was dumped on the property, it'll show up as being a contaminant. Lead was also used in fuels in the Houston area, so therefore you can look at that lead compound, what it's combined with, and determine whether it was a combusted fuel or whether it came from the operations of this client or maybe a previous client. And therefore, the attorney is able to use our information and either exonerate the client or put the blame on the correct party, being maybe a previous owner or maybe somebody on an adjacent property who used a similar compound and were able to prove that that was the originating source. After doing this close to 30 years, I have seen a lot of Phase 1 environmental site assessments, so I have a way of looking at them really quickly to determine the quality of the study that's performed. The number one thing I look for is I turn straight to the picture section. Since it's so easy now to take photographs with your camera, take a picture of a lot of things and then never discuss it in the text of the report. So we see a picture of what's a horrible pit with staining in it on the facility, and it's never addressed as an environmental concern, something that a potential financial institution, buyer, lending institution would want to be aware of. The second thing I see very often is a very poor synthesis of data. They're unable to synthesize and evaluate what the true risk to the financial institution is. So they don't properly take the facts and integrate it to a concise conclusion. Sometimes they see that they're way too conservative and every little fact becomes a major problem, and sometimes it's things that they've completely left out from the discussion in the text to bring it into the conclusions. And we find that a lot of consultants rely only on the written report, and then the client gets it and they don't really understand. So they appreciate the fact that we're willing and able to take these concepts that are produced in the report and explain it to them, as opposed to just spouting off facts and seeming like we're very smart. And one of the things that I would look for if I was shopping for an environmental consultant is the longevity. I've seen a lot, and therefore I've been through a lot, and so I can use my experience modifiers to the benefit of the client.